August 8, 1941. Belyayevka, Ukraine. Early. 5:47 in the morning. That gray time when you can't tell the sky from the mud. You ever notice how the world just, well, it goes dead quiet right before the first shot? Lyudmila, she's crouched behind a pile of jagged stones. Rubble from a wall that used to be someone's home. She's just 24, a history student, you know, thinking about Napoleonic wars and ink stains on her fingers. But right, Geo? She's looking through the glass. That grainy PU scope. The air's thick. Smells like wet dust and that sharp bite and tang of the cold rifle oil. In the crosshairs, there's a German officer. He's just standing there, adjusting his leather gloves. Real fine leather. Checking the time. And then there's Dmitri, off to the left. Poor Dmitri. Shared his bread with her last night. Stale, dry stuff. Sort of tasted like sawdust. But he shared it. He don't know he's walking right into a grave? Dmitri, he's got those tired eyes. The kind you get when you haven't slept in 3 days and all you can taste is cheap tobacco and copper. He's adjusting his collar. You know, just a small action. A mistake. He's exposed for a second. That's all it takes. The German's helmet is peeking out from behind a farmhouse wall. 280 meters away. She can see the crack in the masonry. Lyudmila, she don't blink. She holds her breath, waiting for the heart to beat, then squeezing between the thumps. Her hands, they're steady, like stones. But her stomach, well, it's doing flips. That metallic taste of fear. It's thick in her mouth. The instructor's voice. It's ringing in her head. Don't think about the man. Think about the problem. Mathematics. Distance. 280 meters. Light wind from the west. It's math, not murder. The trigger, it's cold iron. Sticks to your finger in the damp air. Crack. The Mosin-Nagant kicks her shoulder. Real sharp. A familiar bruise in the making. Through the scope, she sees it. The German helmet. It jerks back. And then he's just, well, he's just meat. Dimitri's still breathing because that other fella ain't. Back then, no one noticed how quiet she was after that. 0 kills. 1 kill. 308 to go. It wasn't about the blood, you know, a math problem. A calculation where a mistake meant Dmitri didn't see the sunset. But that wasn't the start. No. The start was the fire. Back in Odessa, the university, it was just gone. 11 days earlier, bombs fallen like iron rain. 73 students, her friends, buried under the masonry. Natasha, her best friend, died. In the library. Fire took the whole building. You could smell the burning paper for miles. She didn't cry. She just went to the recruiting office, smoky, thick with the smell of cheap tobacco and sweat. The clerk, he didn't even look up from his papers. "Take a bandage, girl," he says. "Go be a nurse. We need 'em." He thought he knew her. You know, just another girl. But Lyudmila, she stood there stone still. She didn't move an inch. She just pulled out a marksman certificate. She'd spent her weekends at the range while the others were at the pictures. The officer laughed. Said target shooting ain't combat. Combat's blood and screams. So she showed 'em. They gave her the cold rifle, pointed at a fence post. 5 rounds. Boom, 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 boom. All 5 in the center. The room went real quiet after that, like the silence after a shell hits. She wasn't looking to heal. No. She was looking to balance the ledger. That first shot, it wasn't about the blood. No, just mathematics. A math problem where the wrong answer meant Dmitri didn't see the sunset. A problem she was going to solve 309 more times. Just a student, doing the math in the mud. Clack, clack. The bolt slides home. It's a lonely sound. Odessa, 1941. It didn't just break, it shattered. You ever see a city scream? It ain't just the noise of the people, it's the stone, the glass, the very air itself turning into a jagged edge. June, the sky just, well, it split open. Stukas, diving like hawks. Iron rain, that's what they called it. But it felt more like the sky was falling in pieces. My university, the place where I was supposed to be studying the Greeks, the Romans, learning about ancient heroes who didn't have to deal with high explosives, it just became a pile of hot, white dust. 11 days. That's all it took. 11 days before I ever felt the cold. Weight of the cold rifle in the mud. It was the library. Funny how you remember the smell of burning paper. It's sweet. Almost sick sweet. Like fruit that's gone rotten in the sun. Natasha was in there. My best friend. We'd shared our bread, shared our notes, talked about boys and history until the sun came up. But the fire? Well, the fire don't care about history majors. It don't care about dreams. It consumed the whole building in a heartbeat. I stood there on the pavement, hands shaking so hard I had to tuck them into my pockets. Ash fallen like gray snow on my shoulders. I didn't cry. You don't cry when the world is turning to ash right in front of your eyes. You just freeze. I felt this cold, metallic taste in the back of my throat, like licking a copper penny. You know? Pure, unrefined hate. It's a heavy thing to carry. Sort of sits in your chest like a stone that gets heavier with every breath. Next morning, I'm at the recruiting office. Dim light, smoky as a coal mine at midnight. Stunk of that cheap Makorka tobacco, the kind that burns your throat and stays in your wool tunic for a week. Men everywhere, looking at the floor, studying their boots like they had the answers written on the leather. I walk up to the clerk. He was a major, or maybe a colonel. His rank didn't seem to matter as much as the stamp in his hand. He looks at me, doesn't even see a soldier. He sees a skirt, sees a girl with ink stains on her fingers from a pen she'll never use again. "Take a bandage, girl," he says. Real dismissive, like I was a fly he was brushing away from his tea. He laughs, sort of a dry, hacking sound. "Go be a nurse. We need healers, not history teachers. Go join a medical unit. They'll find a place for you." He didn't look at my face. If he had, well, maybe he would have seen the library fire still burning in my eyes. Maybe he would have seen that I wasn't looking for a place to hide. I told him, I've been shooting since I was 14. Regional marksman badges, youth club champion. I knew how to hold a line, how to lead a target. He just scoffs. Says shooting at paper targets in a park ain't combat. Combat's blood. Combat's the sound of a man dying right in front of you while you're trying to remember your own name. He thought I'd break. Most would have, I guess. But I didn't move. I stood there stone still, like I was already part of the earth itself. I told him to test me, right then, right there. I wasn't leaving until he saw what I could do. He looks at the other officers. They're grinning, expecting a show, a bit of entertainment, before they went back to the war. He hands me a Mosin-Nagant, heavy, cold, smelled of factory grease and old, weathered wood. It felt right, more right than a pen ever did. He points at a fence post, way out there, maybe 100 meters, just a sliver of wood against the dust. 5 targets, he says. The room went quiet. I didn't even breathe. I didn't think about the major, or the war, or even the smell of the tobacco. I thought about the library. I thought about Natasha. I thought about the way the ash felt on my skin. Boom, 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 boom. 5 rounds, real fast, like a heartbeat skipping. 5 holes, right in the center of that post. You could have heard a pin drop in that smoky office. The major, he just stopped, grinning. He looked at that post. Then he looked at the cold rifle. Then he finally looked at me. He saw it then. I wasn't there to heal nobody. I wasn't there to play nurse or hold a hand while someone faded away. I was there to collect a debt. Every bullet had a name on it, and I wasn't going to stop until the ledger was balanced. I wasn't the girl from the library anymore. That girl died in the fire with Natasha. I was a debt collector. And the interest, well, the interest was going to be paid in lead. It didn't seem important then. Just another day in a world that had gone completely mad. But that major, he signed the papers. He didn't say another word. He just handed me my orders and moved to the next man in line. The smell of the cordite, it stayed in my hair, sort of a reminder of the path I'd chosen. I walked out of that office and didn't look back at the university or the books or the life I used to have. The university was gone. The books were ash, but I had the cold rifle. And I had a job to do. A long, bloody job. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way the metal of the cold rifle felt against my cheek. Knowing it was the only friend I had left in a world of ghosts. August 19th, 1941. And the air, well, it felt heavy. Sort of like it was waiting for something to break. 11 days after that first shot, and I was already feeling old. We all were. You ever notice how the mud, it don't just stay on your boots, it gets under your skin, into your thoughts. We were holed up in this bombed-out apartment block, stunk of old lime dust, burnt wood, and that sweet, sick rot you can't ever quite get out of your nose once it's in there. Anna Morozova, she was with me. Lieutenant Anna, she was the best of us. 47 notches on her stock. She was smart, patient, followed every damn page of the Soviet sniper like it was the gospel. Hide, fire, move. Move within 30 minutes. Never stay in one place long enough for the Krauts to triangulate you. It seemed right, like it was the only way to stay breathing. I remember the way she looked at me. Her eyes were sunken, dark pits from the fatigue, but sharp, like a hawk. She was up on the 3rd floor, found a spot behind some collapsed bricks, perfect sight lines. I was 1 floor below, laying in the dust, watching the flies crawl over the barrel of my Mosin-Nagant. The itch of the lice in my tunic, it was driving me crazy, but you don't move. You just let 'em bite. It's part of the tax you pay for staying alive. Anna, she took her first shot at 5:30 in the evening. A German machine, the cold rifle crew, 320 meters out. Crack, 1 shot, 1 kill. I heard her boots, real light, clink, 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 across the broken glass as she relocated to the 2nd floor. That's what the book said to do. Don't be a target. She waited 20 minutes, checking her watch, waiting for the dust to settle. Then, crack. A German officer dropped right where he stood, clean, precise. She started moving again, heading for her 3rd position on the ground floor. Tertiary position. That's what they called it in the manual. But Hans Becker, he wasn't reading our manual. Becker, 89 confirmed kills, a specialist. He wasn't looking for where Anna was. He was waiting for where she was going to be. I heard the shot. It wasn't like ours. A sharp, flat snap of a Mauser. Then I heard it. That wet, heavy thud. The box sound of a body hitting the cold. Stone floor above me. My heart? Well, It stopped, just for a second. The silence after a shot like that, it's the loudest thing in the world. Then the Germans, those poor bastards, they started laughing. They knew. They knew they'd caught a ghost in the stairwell. I lay there, the metallic taste of fear filling my mouth. Like licking a copper penny. I could hear my own breath, loud as a steam engine in that empty room. Anna did everything right. She followed the rules. She was a ghost by the book, and the book got her killed. It reminds me of that time in basic training. The instructor's always barking about discipline, but discipline don't mean much when the other fella knows exactly what your September 1941. It was getting colder by then. That sharp, biting wind off the Black Sea that cuts right through a wool tunic like it ain't even there. You ever feel a cold so deep it stops being a temperature and starts being an ache in your very teeth? That's what it was like out there in the slush near the coast, somewhere in the stinking mud, where the world just felt like it was ending. Lyudmila, she'd go out before the sun was even a thought, before the gray light even touched the ruins, and she'd crawl into no man's land and just stay there. 18 hours. Think about that. Laying in the mud. That gray, stinking muck that smells like old iron and wet earth and things that haven't been alive for a long time. So still the frost starts forming on the back of your neck. At the time, we didn't think much of it. We were just trying to stay warm, huddled in the dugouts. But she was building a trap. A chess game in the dirt where the loser don't get a second chance. She started building these dummies. She'd take old rags and straw, stuff them into a spare sleeve, and put a dented helmet on a stick. The crazy trick, you know. The instructors back in Kiev would have had a heart attack, calling it insanity, because the book, the manual, it said you never give the enemy a target. Exposure is death. That's what they barked at us in basic training. But the book was already full of dead snipers, and she wasn't interested in following them into the ground. She'd prop that dummy up just enough to peek over a rotting log or a pile of bricks, just a fraction of an inch, enough to look like a pair of eyes searching for a target. Then she'd hide in her real nest, maybe 5 meters to the right or tucked under a ruined wall. Just waiting. The itch of the lice in the seams of her uniform, it was enough to make you scream. Sort of a constant, crawling misery that never lets you rest. But she didn't move. You can't. You move an inch to scratch, and a German counter-sniper sees the grass ripple, or a bit of dust move, and then it's over. You have to be a ghost, a shadow in a world of shadows. She'd wait for that tiny, sharp spark in the dark. A muzzle flash from some kraut who thought he'd finally caught Lady Death napping. That's all she needed. Those poor bastards, they'd bite on the bait. They'd squeeze the trigger and think they were heroes. And she'd have maybe 3 seconds, no, it was more like 2 seconds, to find him through her own glass before they realized the straw didn't bleed. Her breath. She had to catch it, real shallow. Almost like she wasn't breathing at all. So the steam wouldn't puff out like a signal fire in the cold morning air. You ever try not to breathe when it's 10 below? It burns. Feels like you're swallowing needles. The taste of stale rations. That dry bread that feels like sawdust in your mouth. It sort of fades into the background when you're looking through the glass. You focus on the mathematics, the distance, the windage, the way the crosshairs dance between heartbeats. By October, well, she had 78 of them in the dirt. 78 notches she'd carved into that dark wood with a pocket knife. Every one a soul she'd balanced against Natasha's memory. 36 of them were snipers. The best the Wehrmacht had to offer, specialists. Men who'd spent their lives hunting deer in the Black Forest or looking through expensive Zeiss scopes, and she put every one of them in the muck. They started calling her the Devil Woman over their radios, or Lady Death, and they'd blast these messages through loudspeakers when it was quiet. They'd offer her chocolate, fancy German chocolate and wine and a title in Berlin if she'd just stop. Can you believe that? Chocolate. Like they were trying to bribe a history student with candy while they were burning her home and killing her friends. She just answered them in lead. Clack, clack. That lonely, cold sound of the bolt sliding home. It reminds me of waiting in a duck blind back home in the Midwest. Except the ducks have rifles too, and they're looking for you just as hard. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way the sun would catch the frost on the cold rifle barrel while she lay there, waiting for the light to hit the lens of an enemy scope. Back then, we didn't see the legend. We just saw a girl who was always covered in mud, always looking past you like she was seeing something we couldn't. She wasn't a student anymore. She was a machine, a shadow, waiting for the wind to change. The metallic taste of fear, it never quite goes away. It just gets familiar. Like an old friend you don't really like, but you're stuck with anyway. It sort of sits in the back of your throat, makes everything taste like blood and iron. 18 hours in the slush, barely breathing, waiting for the ghost to blink. It's a kind of dying, I suppose. You stop being a person and start being a part of the landscape. You become the stone, the mud, the cold iron, just a shadow, waiting for the light to hit the lens. And when it did, well, those poor bastards didn't see it coming. Not a single one of them. They'd shoot the dummy, think they'd won, and then the real bullet would find them before they could even smile. I remember seeing her come back from a hunt once. Her hands were so cold they were blue, shaking like a leaf. But her eyes were as steady as a church. She'd just sit there by the lantern, be sure, oiling the cold rifle. Not saying a word. 309. Think about that. Everyone a ghost that followed her home. We didn't know back then. We just thought she was lucky. But luck don't last 18 hours in the mud. Discipline. Hate. Just a girl from the ashes, doing the only math that mattered anymore. Just a shadow, waiting for the light to hit the lens. Sevastopol, June of 42. And the sky, well, it wasn't blue no more. It was a bruised purple, choked with the smoke of 1,000 fires that wouldn't go out. You ever hear a city dying? It ain't just one big noise. It's a million little ones. The crunch of glass under a boot, the hiss of a burst water pipe, the way the dust just never settles on the rubble. We were trapped, our backs to the Black Sea. And the Germans, they were throwing everything they had at us. They weren't just fighting anymore. They were erasing us, bit by bit, stone by stone. Dora, they called it. That massive railway, the cold rifle. 60 tons of steel that spit fire from miles away. Every time it spoke, well, it felt like it was shaking the very teeth out of your head. The ground didn't just tremble, it groaned, like it was tired of carrying all that weight. It reminds me of that time in basic training when they'd set off practice charges. But this was different. This was the earth itself screaming for it to stop. Lyudmila, she was out there every single day, crawling through the ruins of what used to be a school, or maybe a bakery. It was hard to tell by then. Everything was just a gray skeleton of what it used to be. The smell of the ruins. It's a mix of old plaster, stagnant water, And the sweet, sick rot of things you don't want to think about. Her uniform. It wasn't just wool anymore. It was caked in a thick, white crust of lime dust and dried blood. I remember seeing her in a dugout once. The lantern was low, just a flicker of light against the damp walls. And her eyes, they were sunken in, just dark pits in a face as white as a ghost. Fatigue, it don't just tire you, it hollows you out, leaves you like an empty shell on a beach, waiting for the tide to take you. She was looking through that scope. The glass was scratched, grainy, but her hands, they were as steady as a church. You ever see someone so tired they stop blinking? Her, just a shadow with the cold rifle. Then came that afternoon. I think it was June, maybe July. Time gets slippery when the shells are falling like rain. A mortar shell. It didn't even whistle, just a sudden whoomp. The world turned inside out. I remember the smell first, burnt rubber and sulfur, and that acrid, biting tang of high explosives that stays in your throat and your teeth for days. She was caught right in the blast. A piece of jagged iron, shrapnel, caught her right in the cheek. It didn't just cut, it tore, she said later. Her brains felt like a handful of gravel rattling in a tin can, every noise, every shout. It was like a hammer hitting a nail into her temple, a constant, throbbing pressure that made the world go blurry around the edges. She didn't cry. No. She just sat there with a dirty rag pressed to her face, blood seeping through the gauze, and she kept looking through that glass. She wouldn't quit, even when the doctors told her she was done. Concussion. Trauma. Words that didn't mean much when your home was burning to the ground. She was more metal than woman by the end, held together by sheer spite. You know, the kind of spite that keeps you breathing when the world's telling you to stop. She had these iron veins now, a heart that had gone cold a long time ago, back when Natasha died. In the library, she was looking for revenge, but what she found was a kind of machine-like silence. She'd sit there cleaning her Mosin-Nagant, oiling the bolt, her hands never shaken, even while the artillery was turning the street outside into a crater. Then the order came down from Moscow. Pull her out. She was too valuable now. A symbol. Lady Death. They couldn't let her die in the mud. She was the best proof they had that the Soviet people wouldn't break. They put her on a submarine, sneaking out under the oily water of the harbor. I can still see it. That dark, silent shape slipping away. While Sevastopol behind her was turning into a funeral pyre, the city was a giant funeral pyre, a great, raging fire that lit up the night for miles. The sky was on fire, reflections of the flames dancing on the waves like restless ghosts. She sat in the dark of that sub, smell of diesel and sweat and unwashed bodies. The taste of the air was thick, heavy, but it didn't smell like the ruins. She held that Mosin-Nagant like it was her only child. Her fingers wouldn't let go of the wood. Even in her sleep, she was leaving the mud. But the mud, it never really leaves you. It stays in the cracks of your skin and the corners of your memory. She was a machine now, a block of steel wrapped in flesh, just a shadow, waiting for the wind to change and the light to hit the lens. She was heading for the marble halls of the White House, for the cameras and the fancy dinners, but she was carrying 309 ghosts with her, and every single one of them had a face she'd seen through the glass. Funny how small things stick with you, like the way she never really looked at people, just through them, like she was still searching for that tiny spark in the ruins. looking for a target that wasn't there anymore. The silence after the shells. It was the loudest thing in the world. Sort of a ringing that stays in your ears forever. Back then, we didn't think much of it. Just another soldier getting pulled from the line. But she was the ledger, and the debt was almost paid, just a shadow, waiting for the light to hit the lens. Washington, 1942. It was too bright. Way too bright. And the world, well, it was too clean. You know, everything smelled like beeswax and expensive French perfume. Not like the stagnant water and old iron of the trenches. She stood there under those crystal chandeliers, huge, glittering things that looked like frozen rain, but they didn't drip. They just shone. She was next to Eleanor Roosevelt, a tall woman, kind eyes. But Lyudmila, she was still wearing that rough wool uniform. The one with the lime dust from Sevastopol ruins still hiding deep in the seams. She still smelled like cordite and the cold rifle oil, that sharp, biting scent that never really leaves your skin no matter how much soap you use. I remember thinking how out of place she looked, like a wolf in a parlor. And then the reporters. Heck, those fellas were something else. They didn't ask about the windage, or how to time a shot between heartbeats so the crosshairs don't dance. No, they asked about the color of her underwear. And if Soviet women were allowed to wear lace at the front, or if she could use makeup while she was waiting to die in the muck. Can you believe that? Lace, while she was laying in the freezing slush for 18 hours, waiting for a kraut to blink. She didn't answer him at first. She just stared through him. That piercing gaze, the one that sees the target before the target even knows it's dead. She looked at him like they were just blurry shapes in a foggy forest, sort of heavy and useless against the light. Then came Chicago. Thousands of people, all waiting to hear the Lady Death. She stood at the podium, stone still, and she finally let him have it. She said, "Gentlemen, I am 25 years old, and I have already killed 309 fascist invaders. Don't you think, gentlemen, that you have been hiding behind my back for too long?" The silence that followed, well, it was the loudest thing in the world. Like the silence after a shell hits and your ears are just ringing with the truth of it. Those fellas, they didn't have anything left to say about skirts or makeup after that. They just looked at their shoes. She went home after the war, back to Kiev, back to the history books and the ink. But the student she used to be, well, she was buried somewhere under the rubble of the library with Natasha. All that was left was a ghost in a library. She'd sit in the corner, far from the windows, always looking past the people walking by. She never really looked at you. She just looked through you, like she was still searching for that tiny, deadly glint of light off a German lens in the ruins. She was a legend. But legends don't sleep well. I suppose, man, she carried those 309 ghosts in her pocket every day. The shrapnel scar on her cheek, it never quite faded. Just a jagged line that reminded her every time she looked in the mirror. Funny how small things stick with you. Like the way she'd reach for her pen like it was a bolt action. No, it was a pen. But she checked the weight, checking the math, waiting for the light to hit the lens. Just a shadow, waiting for the ghost to blink. One last time.